Imagine ripping a blues solo on stage with your band, your bassist and your drummer providing a comfortable soundscape on which your tasty guitar lines can float. Now imagine that you're just sitting on your front porch with only your acoustic guitar. Wouldn't you like to be able to jam out all by yourself? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can. There's a long tradition of fingerstyle blues harkening back to the early 1900s with legendary players like Robert Johnson, and although much fingerstyle blues music is mixed with vocals, solo instrumental tunes can be so much fun to play. So welcome to Guitar Books the Podcast. My name is Joe McMurray. I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about my new books, Fingerstyle Blues Guitar, an in-depth study of the 12-bar blues in the key of E major. It's book 1 and book 2. The first priority of these books is to quickly get you playing a solo instrumental 12-bar blues, and then to build on it until you can freely improvise or jam. You should be up and running by the end of the 3rd chapter, and each following chapter will add icing to your blues cake. I've organized the book so that the concepts and exercises progress logically, thoroughly, and with a smooth difficulty progression. I take care to explain how to immediately apply each concept to your playing. These 2 books are essentially one long book split down the middle. Book 2 picks up right where book 1 left off, at chapter 8. The whole thing was just too long. It would have been around 350 pages. I recommend that everyone start with book 1, which is suitable for all skill levels. Complete beginner players who work through the first few chapters should be able to improvise a satisfying fingerstyle blues solo. Intermediate to advanced players will breeze through the first few chapters, but will hopefully pick up some useful information starting around chapter 4. Book 2 is more suitable for intermediate to advanced players. It digs deeper into higher level concepts that are more technically and theoretically difficult, but will elevate your playing to new levels. You will learn to play new scales, turnarounds, rhythms, time signatures, key signatures, and more. Again, I recommend that everyone start with book 1 and then move on to book 2. So, I'm not here to teach you every authentic Robert Johnson lick or every subgenre of fingerstyle blues. You won't learn and memorize a bunch of new tunes. However, I will clearly lay out how to create a solo fingerstyle guitar performance in which you improvise over the 12-bar blues structure using a monotonic bass line. You will master one platform, one structure, through which you can channel endless creativity and put on a satisfying blues performance. There are lots of fingerstyle blues books on the market. Why work through mine? I love many of these books. As you can see, I have a lot of books. I love learning from books. I love learning from teachers, from online videos, from recordings, but I do love books, and I've learned a lot from them. The first thing that differentiates my book is that its focus is on playing the blues over a monotonic bass line. Most other books focus on playing the blues over an alternating or Travis-style bass line. Although they may present some material using a monotonic bass line, they're usually focused on that alternating bass line. There is one book that focuses on the monotonic bass line, and that is Joseph Alexander's Fingerstyle Blues Guitar. I was honestly very influenced by this book, and I highly recommend it in addition to mine. However, Alexander's book is much more focused on teaching you a bunch of authentic blues language and licks over the monotonic bass line, with less emphasis on putting together a full lyrical 12-bar chorus, nonetheless a full multi-chorus performance. My book starts from a much more beginner-friendly place and builds with a much more gradual difficulty progression. It has easier melodies and rhythms at first, with many, many examples. Another thing that I think sets my books apart is my focus on using lyrics to create lyrical melodies. Who would have thought? So the idea is that you take sometimes cheesy, sometimes funny lyrics, whatever, bluesy lyrics, and you use them to guide your improvisation. So you might sing the lyrical line in your head as you're playing it, or maybe out loud. So one of my favorite lines is, "These old boots have many stories, lost footprints tell their tales." So I'll kind of sing that as I play, and it will guide my melody note choices and the rhythms that I use. So that is different about my books, and I think it's very effective as a teaching tool and as a performance tool when you're improvising or songwriting. So I've spent a lot of time working through many books. I have a lot of real-world experience, and I've tried to create a series of books that will be most effective at teaching you to actually jam on the blues. So, Guitar Books the Podcast is a podcast in which I review books. Honestly, there's almost always something that I like about a book. I will not review a book that I don't like at all. But I will also be honest when there's something I don't like. So I'm going to be critical of my own books for a minute. The thing that I think most people will be upset about or critical about is that I don't have any sound recordings, audio recordings of any of my examples, at least currently. I just need more time in life. I currently have 2 little kids, and getting this finished was a monumental task. Many late nights, and I still had to wake up early for the kids. So I'm sorry that I don't have the audio recordings currently, but if you are interested, you can always email me. I'll put my email address in the show description below. It's joemcmurrayguitar@gmail.com. You can always email me, and I can send you specific audio recordings from my iPhone or something like that. Also, I do teach video lessons online, so you can always sign up for some video lessons, and I can go through the book with you or show you what you need, that sort of thing. So, also, moving on, another thing that I'll be a little critical about is that I can be wordy and overly thorough. Some people want the explanations, some people don't. I try to keep some of the wordiness out of the normal chapters, and I put a lot of it in the appendices at the back, where there's a lot of information on music theory, general music theory, and music theory specific to the blues. I think my appendices could be an entire book on their own. Each book contains the same Appendix A and Appendix B. So that's my overall synopsis of my new books. They are available as paperback copies and as ebooks on Amazon, and I really hope you'll check these out. So now I'm going to go through these books chapter by chapter, and I'm going to play some examples so you can hear what everything sounds like, and I'll talk about what you're going to learn, and maybe give you some context, and help you figure out if these are the right books for you. Okay, so the first chapter starts out talking about the 12-bar form, and how to play the monotonic bass line over that 12-bar form. So it is extremely important to be able to maintain the form. So it's 12 bars, and it goes over which chords you play for each of those bars, but with that monotonic bass line, you're going to just play. That's the root of the E7 chord, which is the open 6th string, your E string. So instead of a Travis-style bass line or alternating bass line where you're going to just hammer away at that root note. When you go to the 4 chord in bar 5, you're going to go to the 5th string, the root note A. Eventually, when you get to bar 9, for the B7 chord, you'll play the 2nd fret of the 5th string, A, E, bar 12, B. Being able to maintain the 12-bar form while you're playing is super important. Even if you have a mediocre melody, if you can maintain the form, you will be able to play a decent sounding blues tune. So after you learn how to be the bass player in chapter 1, chapter 2 we start adding in some melody. So I start out very simply with just notes on the 1st string. So your open E and your 3rd fret G, and how to play some simple melodies over your monotonic bass line. And here it's something like this. So very simple. Then we move on to the 2nd string, and then we do 1st and 2nd strings combined, etc. It moves very slowly. There are lyrical examples to help you create more lyrical sounding melodies, and you will get lots and lots of practice. It progresses very slowly in difficulty. Chapter 3, we spruce things up with some more interesting rhythms, specifically syncopation. So syncopation can be tricky. Some of my students have trouble with this, and one of my students in particular really helped me to design this chapter. He was having trouble playing the syncopation over the monotonic bass line, and I developed a lot of these exercises to help him specifically, but I think they're going to be great for everybody else. So syncopation, it's when you have melodies, rhythms that accent the offbeats. So you might have a melody like this. So you can start using the lyrical melodies. So maybe you have something like, my baby left me and now I've got the blues. My baby left me and now I've got the blues. And so I wouldn't probably sing that out loud, but I wanted to show you how you can use those lyrics to create a lyrical melody using syncopation. So moving on to chapter 4, this is where I introduce stylistic techniques. These are things like bends, hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides. These are the things that really add soul to your playing. With a guitar, we can be so much more expressive than, say, a piano, because we can vibrato a note. Or this. We can sound much more like a human singer, and it's so cool. So spending some time on these stylistic techniques will really make your playing sound more interesting, more stylish, more soulful, more mature. It'll instantly make you sound better. You know, you can play a bunch of fast notes and wow a few people, but if you play something simple with great tone and great style, it's going to sound a lot better to more people, and it'll ultimately, hopefully, be more satisfying to you. So with these techniques, you might take a simple melody like this. So there, I didn't use any stylistic techniques. So here, I could use a little quarter step bend. I could use a hammer-on. I could use a pull-off. I could use a slide-in. I could use some vibrato. So there's lots of ways to make your playing much more expressive with these stylistic techniques. Also, hammer-ons and pull-offs and slides can help you to play much faster lines without having to pluck every single note individually. Moving on to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is a really fun chapter. I love this. This is about bassline enhancements. So when you're playing the blues, you often want to create this call and response. If there was a singer singing, they might sing a vocal line for a couple bars, and then the band will play for a couple bars without any singing over it. And that's where you might find little more interesting bass lines or lead guitar licks or things like that. So when we're playing solo fingerstyle blues, we might play a lyrical melody for a couple bars, and then we might play something more interesting in the bass line. So this chapter starts off with very simple bass line enhancements, something like one note, something like this. It's that one G note on beat 4 of bar 2. Then it works up to more interesting, more complicated bass lines, so maybe something like this. Moving on to chapter 6, I talk about how to use little chord shapes. So you probably know this E7 here. So just with that, you can play chord stabs over your monotonic bass line, so something like this. But you can use other little chord shapes like this one. You can use, that was called chromatic sidestepping, so you go, you just move a half step below or a half step above. So I talk about how to do that over the blues and how to make it sound good. Moving on to chapter 7, the final chapter in book 1, I talk about how to combine the lyrical melodies with these rhythm section enhancements, whether it's bassline or chordal elements. So you might play 2 bars of melody followed by 2 bars of rhythm section focus. So maybe something like this. Starts to sound really good and like an authentic blues tune. Moving on to book 2. Now we're in chapter 8. Remember, book 2 starts right on chapter 8. So chapter 8 immediately introduces the E Dorian scale, which is this really cool minor scale that includes the major 6th and the major 2nd. So you can play some really cool, mysterious sounding melodies, maybe with the F sharp. Then I talk about how to target chord tones, the notes that are in the chords, which directly leads into being able to play minor third to major third rolls. So over the E chord, over the A chord, over the B chord, things like that. Those sound awesome, give you that classic blues sound. Then moving on to chapter 9, that is my dissertation on turnarounds. I held off turnarounds for a long time. I think you can sound really good just playing the blues and improvising melody lines over bars 11 and 12. However, turnarounds are such a classic part of a blues tune. I wanted to spend a lot of time teaching you really the ins and outs of turnarounds. So I show you how a basic turnaround is built, where you might have a descending line in the melody, something like root, flat 7, 6, flat 6, 5, and then you play the 5 chord to get you back to the top of the tune. Otherwise, you could also have a root, 3rd, 4th, flat 5th, 5th. So you can take that descending melody line and you can add a little drone above it. This one. You can play that descending melody line in the bass, maybe like this. There's lots of ways to play interesting turnarounds, and hopefully by the end of this chapter, there are something like 102 examples. Hopefully you can create your own turnarounds from scratch. Hopefully you can mix and match elements of turnarounds that you already know and combine them in new creative ways. And hopefully you can play a turnaround that goes with what you were playing throughout the rest of the chorus. Something that kind of feels cohesive with what you were playing. So moving on to chapter 10 now, I talk about triplet rhythms and 12/8 time. Triplet rhythms, they sound really cool. They open up lots of creative avenues, and they also help you if you're playing a steady tempo and eighth notes feel a little slow, you can play a triplet rhythm. Triplet rhythms are awesome. So moving on to chapter 11 now, I talk about unaccompanied melodies. So these are just melodies where you don't have any bass line underneath. I always think of Led Zeppelin's Black Dog when Robert Plant starts singing and the band isn't playing while he sings the line, and then the band comes in. That can be really effective when you're playing fingerstyle blues too. Chapter 12 talks about a quick 4 chord in bar 2. It's just going to an A7 chord in bar 2. Sounds really good, you've heard it in tons of blues tunes, but it can throw you off because you just have to think more about your bass line. So sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, but I show you how to do it. Chapter 13 is a very important chapter. In chapter 13, I talk about building a performance with multiple choruses. So if you think of playing a blues, maybe with a moderate tempo, to get through the 12 bars might only take you 20-30 seconds. 30 is probably if you're going really slow. So if you were to go on stage and play one chorus, it might take you 20-30 seconds. You don't want to just play a 20-30 second song. So you're going to want to string together multiple choruses. And there's an art to creating a cohesive performance where each chorus kind of builds on itself. Maybe you have a main melody that you come up with, a head, then you create some variations, then maybe you do some sort of instrumental, chordal, or bassline focused chorus, then maybe you go back to the original melody or something else. So this chapter talks about how to put it all together. Chapter 14 is my chapter where I call it Areas for Independent Study. This is kind of my catch-all, all the loose ends chapter. Things like the importance of learning actual blues melodies. If you learn some actual blues melodies, you will probably be able to come up with more authentic sounding blues melodies when you're improvising. How to move up the fretboard. You can play a lot of great stuff down here around the nut of the guitar, but it is fun to move up the neck, and there are lots of new creative opportunities that come from that. Sometimes new licks just lie more naturally under your fingers as you move up the fretboard, so it's worth taking a look up there at this point. I talk about double stops, natural harmonics, open string rakes, and then I talk about a few alternate scales that you can use, things like the major pentatonic scale and the major blues scale. These can get you in that Allman Brothers sounding territory. The Mixolydian scale, that can get you into that Jerry Garcia Grateful Dead sound. So these are great scales, and I intermix them when I'm playing, even with the minor pentatonic and minor blues scales. Then we move on to chapter 15. This talks about other keys finally. So we've spent 14 entire chapters talking about the blues in E. At this point, it's probably worth looking at some other keys. Hopefully you can play a really nice blues in E at this point. I would rather you be able to play a great blues in E, but not be able to play in any other key, than be able to play a mediocre performance in 4 different keys. But at this point, I talk about how to play the blues in A and G and D, and in the key of D, I talk about doing it with drop D tuning and dadgad tuning. Chapter 16, the final chapter, finally talks about alternating or Travis-style bass lines. So I've held off this, and it's one of the things that really differentiates my book. I focus on monotonic bass lines. But with everything that you've learned over the course of the 2 books, you should be able to play many of those ideas over an alternating bass line. You know, the alternating bass line, it sounds really good, and if you were playing a set, you're going to want to have some tunes with monotonic bass line, some with alternating bass line. If you only played with monotonic bass line for more than a few songs in a row, it would probably start to sound monotonous to your audience. So I talk about playing a blues in E with an alternating bass line and a blues in G. That's the end of the main portion of book 2. At the end of both books, I have 2 appendices. Appendix A talks about essential general music theory, and Appendix B talks about music theory specific to fingerstyle guitar, blues in E. So I tried throughout the books to not include too much music theory within the chapters. If there was something that I felt like you would really benefit from understanding the music theory, I say refer to Appendix B, section whatever. But here, Appendices A and B could probably stand alone as their own book on music theory. Appendix A focuses on general music theory, as I said, things like melody versus harmony, what are scales conceptually and practically, finding the diatonic triads or 7th chords in a key, chord qualities, that's major, minor, dominant 7, things like that. Appendix B talks about the theory very specific to playing the blues in E. So things like finding the diatonic chords in the key of E, so that you know how to actually build your E, A, and B chords. That can help you to target chord tones, to be able to play those minor third to major third rolls. I talk about how to play other scales. The scales that I mentioned earlier, I really get into the theory of how to use those scales, because not every scale works over the entire 12-bar form. The minor pentatonic and the minor blues scale, those both work over the entire 12-bar blues form. The major blues scale, it really sounds good over the 1 chord, but not over the 4 chord. So all of the information, the music theory behind that is contained in Appendix B, and I give you strategies for how to use these scales within your playing. So that's the end of the books. I really hope that you are interested. I spent the last 10 months working really hard on these. Again, I have 2 little kids, and I've put in many late nights, but Fingerstyle Blues Guitar, an in-depth study of the 12-bar blues in the key of E major, Book 1 and Book 2. Remember that everyone should start in Book 1. Book 2 picks up on Chapter 8. These are available on Amazon in paperback or ebook format. And before I let you go, if you haven't seen my first book, Arranging for Fingerstyle Guitar, this is totally different, and I'm really excited about this book still. This shows you how to take a very simple melody and add all the fingerstyle goodness underneath, how to arrange that melody. So there are so many different ways you can arrange any melody, all under the umbrella of fingerstyle guitar, but ways that give your playing distinctly different vibes, all within that fingerstyle genre. So check this out. It's available as an ebook. It's available only through my website. There's a link in the show description below. So with that, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel. And if you do purchase my books, please leave me a review on Amazon. That really helps to generate sales. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.